Alien Students. Bully a Human Ex-Mercenary. Part 1. Marcus Chen sat in the back corner of the Galactic University's Advanced Tactical Studies classroom, his weathered hands folded on the desk. At 35, he was easily the oldest student in the room by a decade. His simple black shirt and worn jeans stood out among the colorful, elaborate clothing styles of his alien classmates. The professor, a tall Zilonian with blue-scaled skin and 4 arms, droned on about theoretical battle formations. Marcus had seen most of these formations fail spectacularly in real combat. He'd watched good soldiers die because some academy graduate thought textbook tactics would work against desperate pirates or drug runners. The Krenak pincer movement, Professor Vexitar explained, manipulating a holographic display, is considered one of the most effective small-unit tactics for urban environments. Marcus almost snorted. He'd used that same movement to clear a space station of hegemony terrorists 3 years ago. It worked, but only because he'd modified it heavily. The textbook version would have gotten his entire squad killed. A paper airplane made from expensive Thurian crystal paper landed on his desk. Marcus unfolded it carefully, reading the message written in standard galactic. "Old human trash doesn't belong here." He looked up to see 3 students snickering at him from across the room. The ringleader was Zarketh, a young draconian whose family owned half the mining operations in the outer spiral. His scaled hide was a vibrant green that marked him as nobility among his species. Beside him sat Quilera, a cetacean whose biosuit kept her aquatic form comfortable in the air-breathing environment. The third was Hexalord, a crystalline being whose species were known for their mathematical precision and cold logic. Marcus crumpled the paper quietly and returned his attention to the lecture. This wasn't the first note, and it wouldn't be the last. For 2 months now, these 3 had made his life miserable. They accidentally spilled things on him, deleted his assignments from the shared network, and spread rumors about how a primitive human had somehow cheated his way into the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy. What they didn't know was that Marcus had earned his place here the hard way. After 15 years as a mercenary, fighting in conflicts across 3 sectors, he'd saved enough money to pursue his dream of becoming a legitimate military strategist. His service record was classified, but his test scores and tactical knowledge had impressed the admissions board enough to offer him a full scholarship. The Galactic University attracted the children of politicians, military leaders, and wealthy merchants. Most students were here because their families could afford it or because their species had favorable trade agreements with the University Council. Marcus was here because he'd bled for it. "Mr. Chen," Professor Vexitar called out suddenly, "perhaps you could enlighten us about the weaknesses of the Krenak formation?" Every head turned to stare at him. Marcus could feel the weight of their judgment. To them, he was an oddity, a human from a backwater planet who somehow thought he belonged among the galactic elite. Marcus stood slowly. "The formation assumes your enemy will react logically to pressure. It fails when facing opponents who are willing to take heavy casualties or who use unconventional tactics. The positioning also leaves the flanking units vulnerable to vertical attacks if the enemy controls high ground or has aerial support." The professor's eyes widened slightly. These weren't standard criticisms found in any textbook. "Interesting perspective. Have you encountered situations where these weaknesses were exploited?" "I've seen it fail," Marcus replied carefully, "and I've used those weaknesses against enemies who tried it on me." Zarketh laughed loudly. "Oh, please, what would a janitor know about real military tactics?" His comment drew chuckles from several students. "Did you learn strategy while mopping floors on some cargo freighter?" Marcus felt the familiar heat rising in his chest, the same feeling he'd get right before a mission went sideways. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was a classroom, and these were just kids who'd never seen real violence. "I worked security," Marcus said simply, sitting back down. "Security!" Quillara's translator gave her aquatic clicks a mocking tone. I told you all he was nothing special. Probably checked IDs at some mining station cantina. The laughter spread through the classroom. Even some of the more sympathetic students smiled at the thought of this scarred, quiet human playing bouncer to drunk miners. Professor Vexitar tried to restore order, but the damage was done. For the rest of the class, Marcus endured whispered comments and sideways glances. When the session ended, most students filed out quickly, eager to distance themselves from the embarrassing spectacle. Marcus packed his datapad slowly, in no hurry to join the crowd in the hallway. Zarketh, however, had other plans. "Hey, security guard!" the young draconian called out, blocking Marcus's path to the door. His friends flanked him on either side. "I've been thinking. Maybe you're in the wrong program. Have you considered janitorial studies? I hear they have openings." "Move aside," Marcus said quietly. "Or what?" Zarketh stepped closer, using his considerable height advantage to loom over the human. "You'll call building security? Oh, wait. That's probably your real job here, isn't it? The scholarship is just a cover story." Marcus looked up at the young alien. Zarketh was maybe 20 years old in human terms, probably never been in a real fight in his life. His scales were unmarked by scars, his claws perfectly manicured. This was a child playing at being dangerous. "I'm asking nicely," Marcus said. "Move. Make me primitive." The insult hit harder than Marcus expected, not because it hurt his feelings, but because of what it represented. These kids saw him as less than them, not because of his actions or his character, but because of his species and his background. It was the same prejudice he'd fought against his entire career, the reason human mercenaries were paid half what other species got for the same work. Marcus set his bag down carefully. "You really want to do this?" "Do what?" Zarketh grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Have a conversation? I'm just trying to help you find your proper place in the social order." "And where's that?" "Somewhere beneath actual students who deserve to be here." The classroom had emptied except for the four of them. Even Professor Vexitar had left for his next appointment. Marcus realized this had been planned. They'd waited until they were alone. Hexalord stepped forward, his crystalline body refracting light in rainbow patterns. Statistical analysis indicates that humans are inferior in most measurable categories: strength, speed, intelligence, technological advancement. Your species only achieved spaceflight through alien intervention. Your presence here is an insult to every qualified candidate who was denied admission, Quillara added, her biosuit bubbling with agitation. My family has produced admirals for 12 generations. Zarketh's uncle leads the 3rd Battle Fleet. Hexalord's people designed half the defensive systems in this sector. What has your family ever contributed to galactic civilization? Marcus looked at each of them in turn. They were so young, so certain of their superiority. They'd never watched friends die in vacuum while pirates stripped a cargo ship. They'd never had to choose between taking a mission that might get them killed or watching their crew starve because legitimate work was hard to find. You want to know what my family contributed? Marcus asked. Enlighten us, Zarketh sneered. We bleed easy, and we die hard. The words came out flat and cold without any emotion. It wasn't a threat or a boast, just a statement of fact. Marcus had learned long ago that humans had exactly 2 advantages in a galaxy full of stronger, faster, smarter species. They were willing to take risks that others considered insane, and they were very, very difficult to keep down once you made them angry. Is that supposed to scare us? Zarketh laughed. Please, I could snap you in half with one hand. Probably, Marcus agreed. You're stronger, faster, and your species has natural weapons. But strength isn't everything in a fight. Then what is? Marcus smiled for the first time since the conversation started. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Experience, Zarketh lunged forward, claws extended, moving faster than most species could track. It was an impressive display of draconian physical prowess. Exactly the kind of straightforward attack that Marcus had seen 1,000 times from overconfident opponents who thought superior biology made them invincible. Marcus stepped aside at the last possible second, using Zarketh's momentum against him. The young draconian crashed into the wall where Marcus had been standing, his claws scraping against the reinforced metal with a sound like fingernails on glass. Lesson 1. Marcus said calmly as Zarketh turned around, confusion replacing arrogance on his scaled features. Speed without control is just falling with style. Quilara activated her bio-suit's combat mode, hydraulic systems hissing as her appendages extended into combat configurations. She was trained in cetacean military arts, fluid, graceful movements designed to overwhelm opponents with coordinated strikes from multiple angles. Marcus waited until she committed to her attack pattern, then dropped low and swept her legs. The biosuit's balance systems couldn't compensate fast enough, and Quilara toppled backward, her combat appendages flailing uselessly as she tried to right herself. Lesson 2, Marcus continued, dodging a precisely calculated strike from Hexalord. Fancy equipment is only as good as the person using it. Hexalord's attacks were mathematically perfect, each strike calculated for maximum efficiency and minimum wasted motion. Against most opponents, his analytical approach would be devastating. Against Marcus, it was predictable. Marcus caught Hexalord's arm mid-strike and used a simple leverage technique to send the crystalline being sliding across the polished floor. Hexalord's body chimed like a wind instrument as he hit the far wall. Lesson 3, Marcus said, straightening his shirt as all 3 aliens struggled to their feet. Algorithms can't account for pure human stubbornness. Zarketh roared in frustration and charged again, this time more carefully. But careful wasn't enough. Marcus had spent 15 years fighting opponents who wanted to kill him, not just humiliate him. These students were playing at combat while he'd lived it. The fight ended quickly. Not because Marcus hurt them, he was very careful not to cause any real damage, but because they simply couldn't touch him. Every attack was redirected, every combination countered, every strategy anticipated and defeated. When it was over, the 3 alien students sat on the floor, breathing heavily and staring at the human who had just dismantled their combined assault without breaking a sweat. "How?" Zarketh gasped. "You're just a human! You shouldn't be able to—" "To what?" Marcus picked up his bag and slung it over his shoulder. "To fight. To think. To adapt." He looked down at them with something that might have been pity. "You want to dasher alien students bully a human ex-mercenary." Part 2. Word of the confrontation spread through the university faster than a plasma fire in an oxygen-rich atmosphere. By the next morning, every student in the Tactical Studies program knew that quiet Marcus Chen had single-handedly defeated 3 of the Academy's most prominent students in combat. The reactions varied by species and social circle. The military heritage students were shocked that their champions had been bested by someone they considered beneath them. The scholarship students whispered among themselves about whether the human might actually be dangerous. The faculty pretended nothing had happened while quietly reviewing security footage. Marcus arrived at his next class to find the usual seat in the back corner mysteriously unoccupied, despite the room being otherwise packed. Students who had previously ignored him now watched his every movement with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The whispered conversations that had once mocked his presence now speculated about his mysterious background. "I heard he was actually Special Forces," one student murmured to another. "My cousin says humans have a secret military unit that specializes in impossible missions," came the reply. "Did you see Zarketh's face this morning? He looked like he'd seen a ghost." Marcus settled into his seat and activated his datapad, trying to ignore the attention. He'd hoped the incident would end the harassment, But instead, it seemed to have created a different kind of problem. Now, instead of being dismissed as irrelevant, he was being studied like a dangerous animal. Professor Colthanis, an elderly Vularian with gray feathers and keen golden eyes, called the class to order. Today, we'll be discussing asymmetric warfare, situations where conventional military doctrine fails due to significant disparities in technology, numbers, or resources. Marcus suppressed a bitter laugh. He'd lived asymmetric warfare for 15 years. Humans were almost always on the wrong side of the equation, outgunned, outnumbered, and outclassed by opponents with superior technology and training. They survived by being unpredictable, adaptable, and just crazy enough to try strategies that any sane species would consider suicidal. Can anyone provide an example of successful asymmetric tactics? Professor Colthanis asked. Several hands shot up immediately. Students began reciting textbook examples of historical battles where smaller forces had defeated larger ones through clever positioning or superior strategy. The Helix Nebula campaign, offered a Zentorian student. Admiral Veltar used gravity wells to disable a larger fleet. The siege of Kronos Station, added another. Defenders used environmental systems against the attackers. Professor Colthanis nodded approvingly. All excellent historical examples, but let's consider a more contemporary scenario. He activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional star map. Imagine you're commanding a small mercenary unit tasked with retrieving stolen cargo from a heavily fortified pirate base. You have 6 crew members, 1 modified freighter, and limited ammunition. The pirates have 30 fighters, defensive platforms, and hostages. How do you complete the mission? The classroom fell silent as students contemplated the scenario. Most asymmetric warfare examples in their textbooks involved fleets and armies, not small unit tactics against desperate criminals. The logical approach would be to call for military assistance, Hexalord finally suggested. The risk-to-reward ratio is unacceptable. What if military assistance isn't available? The professor pressed. What if you're operating in unclaimed space where no government has jurisdiction? Then you abort the mission, Quilara said firmly. No cargo is worth suicidal odds. Marcus found himself speaking without conscious thought. You make them come to you. Every head turned in his direction. Professor Colthanis raised an interested eyebrow. Elaborate, Mr. Chen. Marcus realized he'd spoken from experience again. This wasn't a theoretical scenario for him. It was Tuesday afternoon in the Kepler sector 2 years ago. Pirates are criminals, not soldiers. They're brave when they have overwhelming advantages, but they panic under pressure. You don't attack their base directly. You attack their supply lines, their communications, their escape routes. Make them think they're surrounded by a larger force than you actually have. And how would 6 people accomplish this illusion? False transponder signals to simulate multiple ships, sabotage missions that look like coordinated strikes, leave evidence that suggests you have inside information about their operations. Create paranoia in their ranks. Marcus was fully committed to the explanation now, drawing from real memories of real missions. Pirates survive by being predators. When they start feeling like prey, they make mistakes. The classroom was completely quiet now. This wasn't theoretical knowledge. It was practical experience delivered with the confidence of someone who had actually done these things. Interesting approach, Professor Colthanis said carefully. Have you studied historical examples of psychological warfare tactics? Something like that. Zarketh, who had been unusually quiet since the previous day's humiliation, suddenly spoke up. This is all very creative, but you're talking about fighting criminals and pirates. What about real military opponents? Trained soldiers don't panic at shadows. Marcus turned to look at the young Draconian. There was something different in Zarketh's posture today. Less arrogance, more genuine curiosity. Yesterday's fight had changed something in his perspective. "Trained soldiers are actually easier to predict," Marcus replied. "They follow doctrine, use established procedures, rely on their equipment and training. Criminals are chaotic, but soldiers are systematic. If you understand their system, you can exploit it." "That's impossible," Hexalord interjected. "Military training exists specifically to prevent exploitation of weaknesses." "Military training exists to create predictable responses to common threats," Marcus corrected. "But it can't account for every possibility. The more advanced the military, the more they rely on their technological advantages. Take away those advantages, and their training becomes a liability." Professor Kulthanis was now watching Marcus with intense focus. "You seem to have given this considerable thought. Do you have specific examples of how technological advantages might be neutralized?" Marcus realized he was walking into dangerous territory. His experiences weren't just theoretical knowledge. They were classified operations against various military forces throughout the galaxy. He couldn't provide specific details without potentially revealing sensitive information. "Electronic warfare is the obvious answer," he said carefully. "Most modern military units are completely dependent on communication networks, targeting systems, and coordination software. Disrupt those systems, and even elite soldiers become confused and isolated." "But electronic warfare requires sophisticated equipment," Quilera pointed out. "How would a small unit acquire such resources?" "Theft," Marcus said simply. "Capture enemy equipment and turn it against them. Or use their own systems. Most military networks have standard access protocols that can be exploited if you know what you're looking for." The questions kept coming, each one probing deeper into Marcus's apparently extensive knowledge of unconventional warfare. He answered carefully, providing enough detail to satisfy academic curiosity, while avoiding anything that might compromise operational security. What Marcus didn't notice was that Professor Kulthanis was taking careful notes on a secure datapad, notes that would later be transmitted to certain individuals in galactic intelligence who had very specific interests in humans with extensive practical military experience. After class, Marcus found himself surrounded by a small group of students, not the usual suspects who had previously tormented him, but genuine military science enthusiasts who wanted to continue the discussion. "Where did you learn all this?" asked Yelandra, a Tessarian whose gossamer wings flickered with excitement. "These aren't standard tactical concepts." "Experience," Marcus replied, using his standard deflection. "But what kind of experience?" pressed Mordun, a heavily armored Kronak whose species served as honor guards for various galactic governments. "Security work doesn't usually involve electronic warfare and psychological operations." Marcus found himself in an uncomfortable position. He couldn't reveal the true nature of his background without potentially exposing classified information, but his knowledge was clearly beyond what a simple security guard would possess. "I've had an unusual career path," he said finally. "That's obvious," Zarketh said, approaching the group with his two companions. The young Draconian's demeanor was completely different from the previous day, respectful rather than hostile. "The question is whether you're willing to share any details." Marcus studied the three aliens who had confronted him yesterday. Zarketh seemed genuinely curious rather than confrontational. Quilera was watching him with analytical interest. Hexalord was probably running calculations about the probability that Marcus was significantly more than he appeared to be. "Some things are better left in the past," Marcus said diplomatically. "Are they classified?" Hexalord asked bluntly. "Statistical analysis of your responses suggests concealment of sensitive information." The direct question hung in the air like an active mine. Marcus could feel the weight of everyone's attention as they waited for his answer. He was trapped between honesty and operational security, between his desire to fit in with his classmates and his responsibility to protect information that might still be relevant to ongoing operations. Let's just say I've seen more of the galaxy than most people my age, Marcus finally replied. Some of those experiences aren't appropriate for classroom discussion. It was a careful non-denial that acknowledged the truth without confirming it. The students exchanged glances, clearly understanding that they'd stumbled onto something significant, but unsure how to proceed. "We owe you an apology," Zarketh said suddenly. "Yesterday, we made assumptions based on your species and background. That was wrong of us." Marcus was surprised by the admission. He'd expected continued hostility or awkward avoidance, not genuine contrition. "We're used to competing with each other for academic standing and social position," Quilara added. "When someone new arrives, especially someone who doesn't fit the usual patterns, we tend to react defensively." "Defensively," Marcus repeated with a slight smile. "Is that what we're calling it?" "We were acting like spoiled children," Hexalord stated with typical crystalline directness. "Our behavior was illogical and counterproductive." The apology was unexpected but welcome. Marcus had dealt with prejudice throughout his career, but rarely had anyone acknowledged their bias so directly. "Apology accepted," Marcus said, "but I have a condition." "What condition?" "Stop treating me like I'm dangerous. I'm not here to fight anyone or prove anything. I just want to learn." Zarketh nodded slowly. "Agreed. But in exchange, would you consider sharing some of your practical knowledge? Not classified information," he added quickly, "but general principles that might help us understand real-world applications of what we're studying?" Marcus considered the request. Part of him wanted to maintain his anonymity and avoid further complications. But another part, the part that had always been willing to teach junior Tapper for alien students Bully, a human ex-mercenary, Part 3. Marcus was reviewing tactical manuals in the university library when Admiral Thexara found him. The Altarian officer moved silently, despite her impressive height, her ceremonial battle armor making no sound as she approached his secluded study area. It wasn't until her shadow fell across his datapad that Marcus looked up to find himself staring at one of the most decorated military commanders in the galaxy. "Mr. Chen," Admiral Thexara said in her resonant voice, "I believe we need to talk." Marcus's blood went cold. He recognized the Admiral not just by reputation, but from personal experience. 3 years ago, she had commanded the task force that hunted his mercenary unit through the Helix sector after they'd been framed for attacking a civilian transport. It had taken 6 months and some very creative legal maneuvering for Marcus's crew to prove their innocence. But they'd never forgotten the relentless pursuit by Thexara's ships. "Admiral," Marcus said carefully, closing his datapad, "how can I help you?" "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They left the library together, moving through corridors lined with portraits of famous military leaders and displays of historical weapons. Other students stepped aside respectfully when they saw the Admiral, their conversations falling silent until she passed. "Your academic performance has been exemplary," Admiral Thexara said as they walked. "Top marks in strategic analysis, tactical planning, and military history. Your professors speak highly of your practical insights." "Thank you, Admiral." They also mentioned that you seem to have extensive real-world experience for someone whose official record lists only security consulting as previous employment. Marcus kept his expression neutral. "I've had opportunities to observe military operations in various contexts." Admiral Thexara stopped walking and turned to face him directly. Her amber eyes seemed to look right through him. "Marcus Chen. Born on New Terra Colony. Education through secondary level, left home at 18 to work in the shipping industry. Official employment records show various security positions on cargo vessels and space stations. No military service, no advanced tactical training, no combat experience." "That's correct," Marcus replied, though he had a sinking feeling about where this conversation was heading. "It's also complete fiction. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of that statement hanging between them like an armed explosive. Marcus considered his options. He could continue to maintain his cover story, but clearly galactic intelligence had already figured out his real identity. He could try to run, but there was nowhere to go on a space station surrounded by military vessels. Or he could tell the truth and hope that whatever they wanted from him was something he could live with. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said, finally. Admiral Thexara smiled, a predator recognizing another predator. "Marcus Chen is indeed a real person who worked security jobs throughout the Outer Spiral. He died in a pirate attack on Meridian Station 4 years ago. Whoever you are, you've been using his identity ever since." Marcus felt the careful fiction he'd built around his new life crumbling. "If you know I'm not Marcus Chen, then who do you think I am?" "Captain Jake Morrison, commanding officer of the independent mercenary vessel Lucky Strike. 15-year service record spanning 3 sectors. Specialized in high-risk extraction missions, deep reconnaissance, and asymmetric warfare operations. Wanted by the hegemony for crimes against the state, cleared of all charges by the Galactic Court of Justice 8 months ago." The use of his real name hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd spent 2 years building his new identity, carefully creating a mundane background that would let him disappear into academic life. Hearing Jake Morrison spoken aloud brought back memories of battles fought in the dark between stars, of friends lost to enemy fire, of decisions that had saved lives and destroyed others. "Captain Morrison is dead," Marcus said quietly. "He died with his ship and crew. Marcus Chen is just a man trying to learn how to build instead of destroy." "Noble sentiment," Admiral Thexara replied. "Unfortunately, the galaxy has need of Captain Morrison's particular skills." They had reached a secure conference room deep in the university's administrative section. Admiral Thexara gestured for Marcus to enter first. Inside, he found a situation that made his mercenary instincts scream warnings. Seated around the polished table were representatives from multiple galactic governments and military organizations. Marcus recognized Admiral Kethvar from the Draconian Fleet, General Morthak from the Terran Defense Force, and Commissioner Yulthes from Galactic Intelligence. These weren't people who gathered for routine meetings. This was a crisis response team. "Gentlemen, ladies and honored beings," Admiral Thexara announced, "allow me to introduce Captain Jake Morrison, formerly of the mercenary vessel Lucky Strike." Marcus remained standing near the door, every instinct telling him to run. "I'm not Captain Morrison. I'm a student here under the name Marcus Chen." "Please, Captain," General Morthak said in heavily accented standard. The old soldier's scarred face showed understanding rather than judgment. "We're not here to arrest you or revoke your legal clearance. We need your help." "With what?" Commissioner Yulthes activated a holographic display showing a star chart of the frontier sector. Red markers indicated dozens of locations throughout the region. 17 military installations have been attacked in the past 6 months. The attackers used tactics and equipment that suggest extensive knowledge of current military doctrine and classified defensive protocols. "So you have a security leak," Marcus replied. "That's an intelligence problem, not a mercenary problem." "The security leak is human," Admiral Kethvar said bluntly. "All evidence points to a human mercenary unit with access to advanced military intelligence. They know our procedures, our weaknesses, our response patterns. They're using human tactical flexibility against conventional military forces with devastating effectiveness." Marcus studied the star chart more carefully. The attack pattern was sophisticated, hitting targets that would maximize disruption while minimizing the risk of massive retaliation. Someone was waging asymmetric warfare against the galactic military establishment. "You think it's my old crew?" Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "The Lucky Strike was destroyed in the Kepler sector," Commissioner Yulthes replied carefully. "Official records show no survivors, but certain tactical signatures from these attacks match operational patterns associated with your unit. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. His crew had been more than employees. They'd been family. The idea that some of them might have survived the ship's destruction only to become terrorists was almost too painful to consider. "Show me the tactical analyses," Marcus said. For the next hour, Marcus reviewed detailed reports of the attacks. The more he read, the more his heart sank. The operational patterns were unmistakably familiar. Not just human tactics, but specific techniques that his unit had developed over years of working together. "The Meridian Station raid," Marcus said finally. "That's Tommy's work. He always liked to hit power systems first to create confusion in the dark. And the Titan base assault, that's Sarah's demolition signature. She had a thing for turning enemy ammunition stores into improvised explosives." "So you confirm that these are your former crew members?" Admiral Thexara asked. "Some of them? Maybe." Marcus set down the datapad he'd been reading. "But this doesn't make sense. My people weren't terrorists. We took contracts for legitimate clients. Corporate security, cargo protection, search and rescue operations. Yes, we fought against military forces sometimes, but only when we were hired to do so by recognized governments." "People change when they lose everything," General Morthak said quietly. "Perhaps your crew blamed the military establishment for the destruction of their ship and the death of their captain." The words hit harder than Marcus expected. He'd always wondered if his crew had escaped the lucky strike before it exploded. The ship had been destroyed during a running battle with hegemony destroyers, and Marcus had been thrown clear in an escape pod during the final moments. He'd never found any evidence that other crew members had survived, but he'd also never found their bodies. "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked. "Help us stop them," Commissioner Yulthes replied. "You know their tactics, their capabilities, their psychology. With your assistance, we can anticipate their next moves and put an end to these attacks." "You want me to hunt down my own people?" "We want you to save lives," Admiral Thexara corrected. "These attacks have killed hundreds of military personnel and civilians. If they continue to escalate, we'll be forced to respond with overwhelming force. A lot more people will die." Marcus stared at the star chart, his mind racing through possibilities. If his crew had survived, they would be hurting, angry, and probably desperate. The lucky strike had been their home for years. Losing it would have been devastating. But turning to terrorism wasn't something any of them would have chosen lightly. "There's something else," Marcus said suddenly. "Something you're not telling me." The representatives exchanged glances. General Morthak nodded slowly. "The attacks aren't random. Someone is specifically targeting facilities involved in the development of anti-human weapon systems." "Anti-human weapons?" "Classified research projects designed to counter human tactical advantages," Admiral Kethvar explained reluctantly. "After several incidents involving human mercenary units defeating larger conventional forces, certain elements within our militaries began developing countermeasures." Marcus felt anger building in his chest. "You mean weapons designed specifically to kill humans more effectively? Weapons designed to neutralize human tactical flexibility and psychological warfare capabilities," Commissioner Yulthes corrected. "The research was classified, but somehow your former crew obtained detailed information about these projects. And now they're destroying the research facilities," Marcus concluded. "They're not terrorists. They're trying to prevent a genocide." The room fell silent. None of the military representatives wanted to acknowledge the implications of what Marcus had just said, but the logic was undeniable. If humans were being specifically targeted for elimination, then resistance would be seen as self-defense rather than terrorism. The research was purely defensive, Admiral Thexara insisted. "Designed to protect our forces against human mercenary units operating outside legal boundaries." By developing weapons that would work specifically against human biology and psychology, Marcus shot back. Tell me, Admiral, were you planning to share this research with human governments, or were you going to keep it as your private ace in the hole for when human independence became inconvenient? The lack of immediate response told Marcus everything he needed to know. The galactic establishment had been preparing for war against humanity while publicly maintaining peaceful relations. This changes things, Marcus said. If my crew is fighting for human survival, then I can't help you stop them. Even if their methods are wrong, General Morthak asked. Even if innocent people are dying? Marcus considered the question carefully. His old crew had always operated by a strict moral code. They protected the innocent and fought against oppression wherever they found it. If they had turned to killing civilians, something fundamental had changed in their worldview. I need to see the casualty reports, Marcus said finally. Not the sanitized summaries, the complete lists of who died in each attack. Commissioner Yulthes hesitated, then activated another display. The casualty lists were extensive, but as Marcus reviewed them, a pattern emerged. The deaths were almost entirely military personnel and security contractors. Very few civilians had been killed, and those appeared to be accidental casualties rather than deliberate targets. They're still trying to minimize innocent deaths, Marcus observed. Whatever they're doing, they haven't abandoned their principles completely. Will you help us? Admiral Thexara asked. Marcus stood up slowly, his decision made. I'll help you, but not the way you want. What do you mean? I won't help you hunt them down so you can kill them or put them in prison. Instead, I'm going to find them and find out what really happened. If they're doing this because they think it's the only way to protect humanity, then maybe there's another solution. That's not acceptable, Admiral Kethvar said firmly. These attacks must stop immediately. Then stop developing anti-human weapons, Marcus replied. Shut down the research projects, destroy the data, and announce publicly that such research is forbidden. Show the human population that they don't need to fight for their survival. Impossible. We can't negotiate with terrorists. Then you can't have my help. Marcus moved toward the door. But I'll give you some free advice. If you keep pushing, you're going to find out just how dangerous humans can be when they think they're fighting for their species' survival. My crew is just the beginning. Admiral Thexara's voice stopped him at the threshold. Captain Morrison, Jake, think carefully about what you're doing. The galaxy is watching how this situation resolves. Your actions could determine whether humans are seen as valuable allies or dangerous enemies. Marcus turned back to face the assembled military leaders. Admiral, humans have been proving their value as allies for decades. We've bled alongside every species in this room, died protecting colonies and trade routes and civilians who never even knew our names. If that's not enough to earn basic respect and security, then maybe it's time to stop trying to be allies. He left the conference room and walked out of the building, knowing that his quiet academic life was over. Marcus Chen, the peaceful student, was dead. Captain Jake Morrison had returned, whether he wanted to or not. But this time, he wouldn't be fighting for money or contracts. He'd be fighting for something far more important: the future of his species in a galaxy that had apparently decided humans were too dangerous to be allowed to live free. As he packed his few belongings, Marcus couldn't help but smile grimly. The alien students who had bullied him for being human were about to discover that they'd chosen exactly the wrong species to underestimate. And this time, the lesson would be taught on a much larger scale. Mercenaries How to Survive saw an opportunity to help these students understand the realities of the galaxy beyond their comfortable academic environment. I'll think about it, Marcus said. As the group dispersed, Marcus walked across campus toward his dormitory, unaware that his brief academic celebrity had attracted attention from sources far beyond the student body. In secure offices throughout the galactic government, intelligence analysts were reviewing his university application, cross-referencing his known information with databases of mercenary units and military contractors. The quiet ex-mercenary who just wanted to become a legitimate military strategist was about to discover that the galaxy had other plans for him. Know the difference between us? You learned to fight in a gymnasium with safety protocols and medical supervision. I learned to fight by fighting. You studied war in comfortable classrooms while I lived it in the dark between stars. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. I didn't come here to prove I'm better than you. I came here to learn how to be better than I was. But if you want to keep testing whether this primitive human belongs here, Marcus's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I'm happy to provide more educational demonstrations. The classroom door slid shut behind him with a soft hiss, leaving 3 very confused and thoroughly humbled alien students to contemplate what they'd just experienced.